What percentage of guests cry on the Diary of a CEO podcast?
In this week's episode of Unboxed, I'm speaking with Grace Andrews, the marketing director for Diary of a CEO.
We're not even scratching the surface on what we could do with socials. Imagine what we could do in a social first manner.
The biggest podcast in Europe, hosted by Steven Bartlett.
It's deep and it's intimate. We call it the room where it happens.
How does it feel?
Feels really intimidating.
You can't see the cameras. When the lights go down, our producer wears all black. It's like little details like that. They feel like they're genuinely like a therapy session.
We're going to create a mini masterclass of marketing in the digital age.
It's not about where do you do that. It's like, what could you be doing instead to tell your message and tell your story? Focus deep down on adding value to your community. Don't live on Instagram.
We're going to go into how you can build the biggest podcast in Europe yourself.
I can't tell you that you're going to have 4 million subscribers on YouTube because I don't know that you're going to put in the same effort that we have.
So sit back, relax, get your notepad out because there's a lot of gems coming your way. Where did it start for you?
I came in as a social media manager. So I was literally manning the organic channels, figuring out the platforms, learning as I went. We hadn't started TikTok. Short form wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
It was like starting to emerge.
Pre-COVID, right?
Pre-COVID. It was like just as COVID was kind of happening.
Right.
So you just started to see like the kids on TikTok and you're like, we're not touching that. No one's downloading
Steven
TikTok.
Bartlett is not doing TikTok.
It was almost
dances.
like there was like a stigma, wasn't there? Like around TikTok, which is just hilarious. It's always the way. Like the early adopters are the ones who
get laughed
reap
at.
and reap the rewards.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came in as a social media manager when we had 8,000 YouTube subscribers. Do you know what I mean? This thing was a baby, no consistency. Like it was just emerging as an idea and like what it was going to be. And yeah, 3 years later, I'm in a marketing director role with a team, which is, as we were just saying before, like the best happy accident that could have happened because watching their progression is like the coolest thing in the world. And yeah, I mean, the podcast has scaled at the same time. So
yeah, I mean, I think people love to look at something that's successful and be like, oh yeah, of course it's success. It's successful. There's no graft that's gone into it. But in reality, there's no such thing as an overnight success. And watching from afar, obviously, like knowing Steven loosely from way before Diary and then now, seeing what you guys have built is just phenomenal. And I think over 3 years, everything's changed, right? And I remember there's a graph that I think Steven posted, which you'll be like, yeah, you probably frame it on the wall, where it's like the numbers right here and then pop.
Hockey stick.
So how did that happen? And what was it like for you being at the kind of heart of that?
No one wants to hear it, but it's the compounding consistency. Like really, really, truly, a lot of our core main things that we're still doing today on like the ground level are the things we were doing back then. Like we don't do seasons. We share an episode twice a week so that we never slip out of our like rhythm. We're always consistent because we've seen from every successful entrepreneur out there that consistency really is this secret to overnight success, but people don't see that happening. It's invisible, right? So you don't see the consistency grinding behind the scenes. I think that's like our base level. So consistency is like our standards are consistent. We have high standards. The effort that goes in, the product you see, the guest booking, everything is consistent. The output, the social, everything is consistent. And then we have this extra layer, which is like the special details of like all the experimentation happening, which is also the stuff no one sees. But it's all the things that have failed in that flat bit, like all the experiments we've tried that haven't taken us off, and then we try one more and it's like boom. But you don't see, it's like the iceberg, classic iceberg picture. Like you don't see all of that stuff happening under the sea until it peaks out, and then people are like, overnight success.
Yeah.
But it's not.
What are some of those failures or those things that you've tried, especially from a marketing perspective in your role, right? What are some of the things that you've tried and just like, that hasn't worked?
Oh God, where do I start?
That you thought would work?
We've played around a lot with, so we have this issue, right, of, it's not an issue, it's like it's a blessing, but we have this issue of Steven being very closely linked to the Diary of a CEO. So you've got this person and then this brand, and we thought the route to go down was to separate them because everyone started building these podcast pages. We already had Steven's pages with a 10 million person audience, like cross-platform, and we were like, let's separate them. Let's do a podcast page, even though they were so intertwined. And it was a mistake because our audience had grown because of the podcast, because they're inescapably intertwined. Like we can't separate them, and that's okay. Like one is part of the other. Like people sometimes just call it Steve's podcast, or people call it Diary, or whatever they call it. they know that he's at the heart of it. And a lot of people think he's just a podcaster. But for us, he's so much more than a podcaster. So we're trying to like build out this personal brand with a strategy, and then the podcast with a strategy. And really, it was like a futile exercise because it's so much more beneficial for both brands if we do them in tandem and in collaboration. But like, we tried to build out the pages, and we tried to separate them because we thought that was the direction to go in, because we thought like, let's let this brand live and breathe without relying on him. And we've done it to some degree in some other parts. So rather than focusing and doubling down on the socials, we were like, that doesn't work. Like, we can see that our audience want to see the podcast content on Steve's channels, and they don't want to have to go and follow somewhere else. They want it all conveniently in one place. That's what they've come for. Like, don't take it away from them. But we've done it in other elements. So we've built out product and merch line that can live and breathe without Steve.
Yeah.
So we kind of took the learnings and the lessons from doing it that way, which was just like, we were figuring wasted energy, like to be trying to start from scratch when we already had this existing audience. But we've learned from that, and we've learned that there are things we can do that work without him.
Yeah.
And work in association with, like, this umbrella brand that we're trying to build out.
Because it's funny because like me and Joe, we talk about this a lot, and we were like, we obviously watch you guys all the time, and we saw that exact pivot where actually it was the consolidation and the ease. And I think Reels really helped with that, right?
Yeah.
Where all video could be in one place. Where actually, why are you separating and trying to move people over here? Because I think you've got maybe still the diary page on Instagram, but it's nowhere near as populated, and rightfully so, as Steve's page, because that's the home of it all. And I remember watching his numbers like go like that. The more you guys were flooding with content. And I think it's interesting that you were saying, actually consolidation is probably better now. People want the convenience of having content in one space.
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one most needed but most misunderstood principle in marketing right now on social?
I think people use social platforms to sell instead of raise awareness. And for me, your social platforms are your audience, your awareness, your trust, your community, your loyalty platforms. They're not your selling platforms. And people will come at me for saying that, because of course you can convert through social. Like, we've seen it. Everyone does it. But from like a first principle point of view, sales will come. All of that will come if you build your audience. And if you build, but not even your audience, your community. And like, there's a difference there. Like, audience exists, community are going to go down the pub and tell your mates about you, and like, they're going to spread the word for you. If you focus on building your community on your social platforms first, before anything else, before being like, what about my 10% of sales posts or like my content pillars? Like, forget all of it. Focus deep down on adding value to your community. When it comes to selling, they're there. Like, you would have experienced this over and over and over, like with the guys you work with. If you have that community there, they are primed and ready because of all the free value you've given elsewhere, all the content, all the physical value, or the thoughts, or the motivation, whatever it is. So when the product does come, when the merch comes, when the sales moment comes, you don't have to sell to them because they're ready and geared and waiting. And I think there's so much like misunderstanding with that. Like, product photos don't live on Instagram. Like, if you see a product photo on Instagram, unless you're like announcing something really cool to your community, or like you do it in a really interesting way, like, there are moments in time for it. Like, I said this somewhere recently, and I've had loads of messages of people being like, well, then where do I put photos of my product, whatever. Like, it's not about where do you do that. It's like, what could you be doing instead to tell your message and tell your story? And like, these are storytelling platforms. They're like places where people want to come and learn about you and be part of this journey. Don't like cold sell to them. And I mean, even when you're thinking about your selling posts, like, think about creating TikToks. Think about creating ads.
Yeah.
It's like a mindset shift that needs to happen around social. Like, social for me is like your hub, your community. It's like free, like, give the value back, get them on your email wait lists, get them in your like community channel, whatever it is, and like sell to them there.
100%.
Like, the selling happens as a result of the value you're adding on your socials.
I cannot agree more. We have a thing, right, on sides. We never talk about chicken. It's a number of rules. So we do not post, I mean, maybe occasionally, but we do not post about chicken. We provide entertainment value through our platform, build connection with the audience, and of course they're going to love the brand, and then when they love the brand, they'll buy the chicken. But that's a secondary aim, because it will happen as a result of the connection you're building on social. I mean,
the fact that you've even been able to build a chicken brand, right, is you didn't go out to build a chicken, but like shops and chicken shops. Like, you went out to build a community, and then you're serving them with things they want. And like that's how this game works.
Yeah. So if I'm new, I'm starting out, how do I build a community in 2023? Or 2024?
How we do not have long enough to answer that. I think it's people would immediately answer this with like, or people looking to build community might be like, this area is really saturated, right? Like, how can I break in? How can I find my space? Like, there's so much noise, there's so much things going on. I think you need to be really clear as a starting point. The chicken can come later, but like as a starting point, you need to know who you want to talk to and why. And the why isn't like your thing you're trying to sell. Your why is like your reason for doing this. Like, do you want to build a community? I mean, we're seeing running like pop up everywhere. Like, let me use Runner App as an example. Like, they are this fantastic I mean, I'm basically a full-time salesperson for them at this point because I just preach about it all the time. Ben will love me for this. But essentially what they've done is they have a product, they have a running subscription app. It's like a gamified, personalized platform. But what they focus on is the community. So they've gone and built from the ground up. Like, this wasn't a thing like 2 years ago. They've gone and found and created content that adds value to runners. So it's like free value on Instagram, on their socials, that's highly valuable if you're either like a professional runner trying to advance your marathon time, or you're someone who's never done a 5K in your life. They're giving like free tips, advice, training plans, freebies, like all of these things away. And that's how you build a community from scratch. It's adding value to strangers.
Yeah.
And it's focusing, like focus on your why, not your what. So again, like in the early days, like you wouldn't see, well, I don't think the app even existed. Like it was an ideation thing, but they didn't sell the app. They sold the passion and the value and the commitment that they were going to give them through their community messaging. And then they're like, hey, we've got an app if it's useful to you. And people are like, oh my God, thank God, finally, you're giving me something. Like, this is exactly what I need. But I think it's a case of like, choose your platforms based on where your target audience live and are, but where also you want to create content for. Because especially if you're a one-man band, like, you've got to commit to it. So I'm not going to go and tell you to be on LinkedIn unless you're willing to kind of write posts and create content for there. I'm not going to go and tell you to go on TikTok unless you like have a short form video editor or like you've got set up for that. I think you need this hybrid between like where you want to be, where your audience are, and really deeply understanding why you want to do it, because your why will dictate everything.
Yeah.
Your why will dictate the content, the value, the audience you draw in, like everything. Not your what. The what will come later. Just focus on your why.
Yeah, and one thing on that point is around sustainability of the content, like actually being able to keep it going, because the volume requirement these days is so high. You need to be pumping and pumping and pumping and being consistent with that. And so many people, I think, fall down because they overspend on content and they don't build sustainable plans around it that they can actually do in their lives. I mean, what would be your advice to people looking to create a content plan? They're like, right, I get the platforms, I'm up for it. How do I actually plan it so that it can work for my life?
This is going to be different for everyone, right? So if you're a one-man band business owner who's literally doing everything from production of the product all the way through to like distribution in your cupboard, you're not going to have hours on end to like do social and do content. Like, I get that. It's going to be different if you've got a team and you can afford to outsource to freelancers and you can bring specialists in. Like, it's going to be different. So this is different for everyone, but I think you've got to find whatever you can be consistent with. If that is one post a week, perfect. If that's one post every day, perfect. Whatever it is, I just want you to try it and be consistent for like a month to 3 months, because that's when all your learnings are going to happen. You just need to create a cadence that allows you to learn, because it's a feedback loop at the end of the day. Like, you're putting stuff out there, you're figuring out if it does anything for you. Does it convert to followers? Does it convert to engagement? Does it convert to click-throughs? Like, whatever it does. And then you can just do more of that. And there are so many resources now to speed up the process. Like, if we think about AI, like maybe we'll get into this later, but like the solution and the support that AI can aid you with, if you're a one-man band in this world now, even compared to last year, like, you can type in ChatGPT and get it to build your content plan. You can then use a AI video editing tool to cut down a long form piece of content that you filmed for 10 minutes into 5 clips that you can share over the next month across your platforms. Like, you can turn content creation into like an hour job now that used to take a day. And I think leaning into all of that tech and updates is like the only way to go if you're one man band. I've said that back a million times now, looking to compete at the same level as like some of these like mid-sized companies. And also, if you're able to see early on the value and the return that you're going to gain from building this community, it's worth investing in the resource, because I think people get it, but they're not willing to kind of part with that investment for something like social when they could put it onto, I don't know, another area of their business. But really, if you truly find someone who deeply understands like your business and social, you're onto like a winner. Do you know what I mean? Like that is what everyone wants. That's you've struck gold.
Yeah.
And that's where your return on investment is just going to start churning.
Yeah, and I mean, I say this to creators all the time. Actually, I think one of the earliest episodes I had was with Max Fosh, who I'm now friends with, and like I first met him on the podcast, and I remember saying to him like, "Bro, you need a team. Like, you need people around you." He was doing basically everything himself. He ended up hiring people off the back of him just being like, "Okay, baby, I do need a team." He's now gone from strength to strength. I saw him the other day, and he said, "The growth that I have had is because 100% I resourced up and I got a team, and without that producer and without this creative partner, he would never be in the position he's in right now." And I think even on a smaller level, even if it's just using Fiverr or finding people out, there's resources out there now, more available than ever before, to help you to make this happen. I mean, what would you say is your kind of, you know, the kind of open your bag videos? What would be your bag of sort of tools or platforms or things for somebody who is starting today?
Fiverr's a great shout. We use Fiverr all the time. Even like this morning when we've got a project and I desperately need someone to do some branding for us, and we don't have in-house branding, it's like straight on Fiverr. I mean, we're actually building out a freelance network and database now so that we have that pool for ourselves. But in terms of tools, you need your something that allows you to stay ahead, and something that allows you to like see the trends incoming. So whether that's following certain pages on the apps, or it's subscribing to newsletters. There are so many amazing newsletters that allow you to like stay up to date, or listening to podcasts. Like, you need something that's your how I'm going to stay ahead here, or like how I'm going to keep on top of all these like ever-changing landscape. So that's your first thing. My second thing is your planning or your scheduling like software or tool. We're currently using Brandwatch because it also incorporates like social listening tools, which are really, really useful for analysis, like competitor analysis, but also personal analysis, and really understanding what's happening in your industry on like a wider scale. One of my favorite tools actually that we use for kind of identifying trends as they're coming up is either CrowdTangle or TweetDeck. One's Meta owned and one's X owned. Just anything that allows you to kind of get that bird's eye view on what's happening kind of on the ground, and like really getting your ear to the ground and listening to the trends as they're happening. They're really great. Obviously, we use quite a lot of AI now, so whether it's something like a ChatGPT plugin or Veed.io for transcribing. We also use Otter for transcribing. Just anything that allows you to like speed up the processes and get to the end goal that we would have got to ourselves just quicker. It allows us to like do other things. I think there's still a need for human like not intervention but like interaction, especially as like we care so much. I think there's a really easy route right now, and it's stick everything into AI, and you can kind of see it. Like, you can see the LinkedIn posts that are written by it. Like, it's painful. Like, it's quite painful to read. And don't get me wrong, there's like I think it can get to you to a certain point. Like, we'll use it to like inform ideas or build out plans from like my mad thoughts. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll be like, organize this so my team can comprehend. And there's like a place that's speeding up getting to where we need to go. But it's not entirely reliable unless you don't really care about what you're doing.
Yeah, we had Henry Ida, who is like an AI expert, come on the show talking about how entrepreneurs cannot get replaced, and that's coming out, I don't know when, but soon. And he said it's like the equivalent of having 30 interns. So treat them, not to demean interns, but treat them
that's
like,
a great way
like
to
your interns, and it speeds you up times whatever 30 interns would speed you up. So it's not like you're going to get expert analysis or the best thing in the world, but it will get you 70% of the way. And I think and what he also said, which is so true based on what you were saying as well, those who do not use AI to speed themselves up will get beaten in every job application by people who will to speed them up, and that's kind of okay. You need to just use the tools to get you ahead.
It's just leaning into like the tech. Like, it's, if we think back 15 years, like think about the people who early leaned into socials. Because it's the same thing.
So if I am young and I want to build my brand, and let's say I'm following your advice, I'm not using social to sell it so hard, etc., how do I start to build some consistency and to make good content? Like, what does good content look like to you? And let's talk about specifically TikTok to start with.
TikTok's a really interesting one because if you'd asked me 3 months ago, I'd have been like, your short form, your hooks, your call to action, your storytelling, and like if we go into really quickly, like what makes a fantastic clip, like what's going to give it the best chances of going viral in the algorithm, you've got that hook. We all know you've got 3 seconds less. You've got 1.5 to 2 seconds to draw someone in. How can you make it broad enough to reach a wide enough audience and specific enough to compel people? Then you need to think about your story arc, the bit people miss. So the bit between the hook and the call to action, or whatever your kind of your cliffhanger, whatever kind of that end section is. What's that story? What's happening in between? Whether it's like a talking heads clip or a funny meme or like a reel, whatever, or a trending piece of content. What is the thing that's going to draw people through? Like it's there's no point. It's like having a thumbnail that doesn't mean anything to the rest of the story. Like you need to think about a clip in its entirety, even short form. And then if it needs it, whether it's a cliffhanger to draw people to go to watch like a long form piece of content, or a call to action to go and engage with something else, or to follow, or whatever it is, like think about a clip in its entirety. Don't just get lost with the hook. But TikTok have introduced long form video. We can now go up to 15 minutes. Photos on TikTok are absolutely popping off. Like they're going crazy, and it's like, it's now becoming an all-encompassing platform, and it's not isolated to those who do short form content. So I mean, even from a personal perspective, like I take photos of absolutely everything in my life. So I've just started uploading photos to TikTok, and they're like doing really, really well, like way better than if I uploaded to Instagram. So there's a place now on TikTok for different groups of people and different audiences, and there truly is an audience for everything on TikTok. There is any word, talk on the end of it. Lizard talk. Like someone told me about lizard talk the other day.
You'll click on the hashtag, it's like 3 billion. What?
And I'm like, this is a whole niche that I didn't know about.
Not
but
for me, but fair enough.
The communities are there, and I love that. Like you get to literally see all these like niche communities where people find their thing and have their thing.
Absolutely thriving, yeah.
So TikTok's a really interesting one because it's evolved so rapidly. Even like in the last 6 months, like it's the strategies had to change. Also, the algorithm is so different to like the other platforms. So really, you can just chuck out content and use it as your testing platform because it's not going to impact like follow account on TikTok really doesn't matter because it doesn't dictate how your content's going to.
And how many people actually go to your profile anyway?
It's a completely different platform. Like it all lives on your For You page.
Because so many brands and so many marketing managers and so many social managers still don't get it, because I do think it's so difficult and requires a lot of trial and error. And I think what you said, right, you use it personally. You're trying stuff all the time, so you'll be seeing on a personal level what will work and what won't. I mean, what would be your advice to marketing manager in a corporate older brand who's like, I don't get TikTok, I cannot understand it? What would be your one piece of advice to them?
To be totally honest, like not everyone needs to be on TikTok. Like I think is that quite controversial? I don't know.
I like that.
Like you don't need to be on TikTok. Like if your audience are not on TikTok, which they might not be, loads of people are on TikTok. Like a huge wide demographic. It's not just your Gen Zers or your millennials. Like loads of people on TikTok. Your mums are on TikTok, whatever. But if you don't feel like the biggest crossover between your audience and the platform is on TikTok, then like that's fine. Focus your effort somewhere else. I would much rather you focus on 1 to 2 platforms and do it amazingly well and be like rigorously consistent than try a new platform because everyone's telling you you've got to do it. So I don't think you do need to be on every single platform if it's not for you, and like it's so specific to every single brand and every single business. But I would say if you are a young marketing manager at a company and you are desperate to get on TikTok but you can't get buy-in from your stakeholders because they don't get it, show them and demonstrate the value, because at the end of the day you all want the same thing. You'll probably all want growth, or you probably all want conversion, or you probably all want revenue generation. Show them that can be part of that process and get buy-in kind of that way, rather than trying to convince them that like short form is the future, or like we should jump on these trends and like it's really fun. Demonstrate and like get in their mindsets and show them the revenue opportunities, and suddenly you're talking their language. Like just, I think people get really caught up with this. Like people are always asking me like, I can't get my boss to like get involved with TikTok. I'm like, well, build a business case for it. How would you present anything else, or how would you pitch anything else?
What is a business case for TikTok, you think?
It's huge revenue driving opportunity depending on what you offer. Like if you're a product-based business, obviously there's literally TikTok Shop in there, which is
flying right now,
which is crazy.
random mums in Hull making 20 bags a month these days. It's crazy. And I think it's also, this is one where like people have no idea unless you see it and you're like, whoa, this is just non-stop. But some people are catching on and they're just going hell for leather on it, and actually you see like they're making ridiculous money.
But do you know what's really important, what you touched on before, is how I use my platforms to figure things out. I wouldn't trust hiring a social media manager if they weren't doing that, because you need to be figuring it all out in your own spaces. Like, I use my platforms, I don't do any kind of I don't offer any service through my platforms anymore. I literally use it as my playground. Like, I get to do all my testing and all my experiments and figure everything out there, and it doesn't go to 10 million people. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's my risk-free zone. Like, that's where I get to play and figure it all out and do the learnings. And I'm scrolling, I'm seeing the people packing the pick and mix on a live stream on TikTok to like thousands and thousands of people being like, this is an interesting niche. Like, is this something we should be tapping into? Like, you've got to be in it to see it. And there's a difference between being a user and being like in the profession, but you definitely need to have both. I think everyone in our social content team like has some level of presence on a certain platform, because it's demonstrating that they know what they're talking about. Yeah.
So for podcasts specifically and podcast marketing, what is the marketing mix that everyone should be using for 2024?
I mean, without a doubt, if you're looking to grow on podcasts, it must be filmed and it must be in person. So you've ticked off 2 things there. And it confuses me that people aren't doing that, but I assume they don't care.
It's also, I think, because I think the second point is really interesting. It must be in person. Completely agree. I refuse to do video. I hate them. Zoom podcasts are just never going to work.
Well, one, the audio is absolutely terrible and unbearable to listen to. Like, it's horrendous. It's a horrible experience for the end user. So they're probably not going to come back. Waste of time. It's also, you don't get, like, you maybe get 20% of the connection. You don't get the humor. You don't get the feelings. You don't get the connection which is needed for a conversation, and you hear the difference. We'll never ever do a Zoom interview for that reason. It's just we promise our users and listeners and community a good experience, and we won't go beneath that bar. I think you need, if you care, and you know, I get that some people do podcasting as another marketing channel, so I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but if you're looking to use your podcast kind of as your source of content and you're looking to grow and expand, it must be filmed. And you know what? If that means at the start filming on your iPhone, that's fine. Apple just filmed their latest massive TV commercial on iPhones. Like, that's fine. But you need to be filming it. You need to be thinking about the long form and where that's going to live. Is it on YouTube? That wasn't traditionally a podcast platform. It has become one. Spotify video has massively grown this year, so maybe it just lives on there, but like, whatever, you need to figure out where your long form lives. More and more people are watching podcasts than listening, so it really is becoming a show, and it's moving away from being this audio first piece of media into something that's replacing television, like mainstream television. I think the update that came from Spotify a couple of weeks ago, where you can now watch podcasts on your TV through the app, is really interesting and probably dictates that. And then you need to be thinking about how you reach people, because these aren't reach platforms. Like your Spotify, your Apple, wherever you're listening to your audio, they're not reach platforms. And what I mean by that is you don't stand a chance of organically growing if you just keep posting your content to the same place, because they're getting there with Spotify. Spotify's built like a feed, but people aren't really using it yet. It hasn't got great adoption, so there's no chance of getting new eyes unless you're bringing them in externally. So your best chance is probably like word of mouth or people sharing an episode in a WhatsApp group. How do you scale that? You need to be sharing to socials. So you need to be thinking about a social first content strategy when it comes to podcasts if you want to grow.
Yeah, completely.
And if that is cutting your long form episode into 3 clips and getting it out consistently every single episode, every single week, like, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
And then it can evolve from there.
Harry Stebbings, I always think of as a good example, right? 20VC, he does it all himself using Descript, and it's filmed. Yes, it's Zoom. I think he does a lot of them in person, some obviously away because he has people in America and so on. But the consistency, the growth, like in his market, he's cornered it, and that's actually all been done by him while running a VC. It's like the most impressive thing. And so I think the barrier to entry has just come so far down. You can go on Amazon, you can get a light, you can get a mic. These things aren't expensive in the way that they used to be. And if you have an iPhone, you kind of have everything. How long do you think people should be thinking? If I'm like, all right, I want to start a podcast, I want this to be the next Diary of a CEO. Bring me down to earth. What's my realistic timeline? What do I need to do to get to anywhere close to that kind of a level? And how long will it take me?
I mean, it's taken us 2.5 years, 3 years to get to where we are now. So I can't tell you that start now, 3 years time, you're going to have 4 million subscribers on YouTube, because I don't know that you're going to put in the same effort that we have. Like, we have a team now of nearly 30 entirely dedicated to this show. And we see it as a show because it lives on airlines, it lives in prison cells now. We're about to go into all sorts of other areas of distribution. It's on iPlayer, it's on kind of your TV. So we do treat it and see it as a show, which is, I think, why we've done a lot of things in a direction that people didn't see coming. So like when we started to produce trailers, everyone was like, what is this? Like, we've never seen a trailer for a podcast, and it's made so much sense to us because it was a show. It
was never a podcast.
It was never a podcast. Yeah. So if you go to see a movie and like you launch it, right? So we launch our episodes. And we do so much now to launch our episodes behind the scenes that, you know, people don't even know. We're in contact with all sorts of people to push it from all sorts of angles so that we reach that target audience as soon as we go live. So it depends. Like, I can't tell you that you're going to have 4 million subscribers in 3 years if you're not going to commit the time and energy and effort that we have. But if you are consistent and you think about that external reach strategy through your socials, whatever that may be, whether, you know, there are some pages who have, some podcasts who have dedicated pages, or whether it's integrated to your personal brand, or whether you set up a email newsletter to accompany it, like whatever that external growth mechanism is, because you need it. If you are consistent with that at the same rate you're consistent with your podcast and the standards and the experiments that are happening there, like, you are going to see steady growth. Like, this industry isn't going anywhere. It's swelled during lockdown naturally as people were at home. They turned to their microphones, they turned to their iPhones, and everyone started one. So the stats are quite skewed, and some will say that it's like shrinking or like plateauing. But really what happened is it swelled during this period, and actually the new episodes that are coming through and new series that are coming through aren't dropping off after 3 episodes, which is what was happening in lockdown, and they are committing to them long term. So the growth of podcasts that are seeing more than 3 episodes is higher than it was in lockdown. So that, I don't know if that made any sense, but the stats are quite skewed. So people are like, oh, is it the end of podcasting? Is it going?
No.
So it's like,
everyone was bored. It's like,
it's transforming.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone was at home and they had access to Zoom and they learned how to screen record. So they made a podcast.
Yeah, like everyone made a podcast.
Everyone made a podcast.
Which is fun. Like, I love it.
Nice little hobby for lockdown, but it's fine if it doesn't continue, but it also shouldn't almost be treated as a trend for the wider industry. It was such an anomaly on every front, right?
Like literally on every single front. Like, everyone was a TikTok star.
Yeah.
And like, now everyone's back to work.
It's funny that the amount of TikTok creators I meet who are big now, and they're like, lockdown. It's just every single one.
It's like everyone's secret sauce.
Yeah, it's like, how did you do it? Oh, lockdown.
Oh, we needed a pandemic.
I was bored at home. Okay, fair enough. Now you got 2 million followers and you're living the dream. Great. What's your vision for the show? Where do you want it to be? Because obviously you've got so far ahead now, right? You guys are just killing it. And again, you've got this amazing machine, which is really the secret sauce, is this machine behind it and the consistency and the grind from 10,000 followers and subscribers 3 years ago to now. What's your vision for where it's going to go from a marketing perspective?
I want it to reach as many corners of the world as it possibly can. So we've focused our strategy really heavily on US this year. So we've done 5 trips next week to the US, because we wanted to really, really engage with people out there, and it's seen our YouTube majority audience switch and pivot over to the US, so it's been really successful. We have a huge audience in Australia. We're going over to Australia next year.
It's a long flight, that. Good luck.
Never been.
Yeah.
Never been. I'm ready for it. But I think what we do and why we do it is because we're so driven by the impact we see it have on people. It's not the number. Like, the numbers are amazing. Like, it's really cool. It's great. It is what it is. Like, the numbers will come and it is what it is. Like, we get, as I'm sure you do, we get messages from people telling us that, like, they've left their 10-year relationship, or they overcame grief because of a certain episode and they've been introduced to them via the podcast, or they never had that conversation with their dad and they've finally been able to have that conversation. Like, real life stuff like, if that can happen to as many people as possible via this podcast, like life-changing conversations through this podcast, like that's my goal. And how do we do that? We keep going until we can reach as many people as we possibly can. And I know this sounds nuts, but like, I even texted Steve earlier being like, we're not even scratching the surface on what we could do with socials with the podcast. Like, it's not a social first strategy. It's a secondary thought at the moment. And we've managed to get here doing that. Imagine what we could do if we dedicated full-time people to this growth strategy in a social first manner.
What does that look like? I'm interested.
I think right now we have our polished, finished podcast episode, and that's all we go off. We have this person in this room for like 2.5 hours. Like, what can we do before? What can we do after? What can we do with photography? What can we do with photography? What can we do with some more raw, like, behind the scenes type of content? Like, I want someone with a phone, like, going around getting different angles,
almost like the vlog but for social.
Exactly. And the vlog has, you know, we decided to, Steve did a vlog back in the day, brought back the vlog this year.
The daily vlog of Social Chain, man. That was a time.
Different times.
What a time to be alive.
Different times. It blows my mind now, being involved in what the vlog looks like, how they manage to get that out every day. Like, shout out
ridiculous.
To that team.
Yeah,
They're insane. We're like, we can't compete. But it's different. It's like a different style. But the vlog, to us, we've got someone amazing working on it, but we haven't really started being consistent with it, and we haven't like thrown ourselves into it fully. We're sort of just learning and like figuring it out. It's nearly at 100k subscribers. Each episode is getting like over 100k views because of this existing community that we've built. That's because people bloody love the raw, behind the scenes, like juicy, in your lives, fly on the wall stuff. Like, we know that. We're not doing any of that with the podcast.
Or the guests.
Like, when you think about, I think about brands that are doing like social first stuff from like an editorial perspective. I think Unwell Community, Alex Cooper, does this really well. So she really treats each episode of both her Call Her Daddy podcast and the podcast she's built on her network as an episode launch. And that means you're getting trending TikToks with the guest, you're getting quotes and statics. They're just touching all the different touch points of social, and it's not just the long form repurposed, which to me is a secondary thought. It's going in with like, this is the long form, but we're going to social first this, and that's different content strategy. And it's like burning in my mind. It's all I can think about at the moment. And
also with the people you have, right, the names you've got, I mean, you've got an intimate access with people who, you know, from the 1.5 seconds you've got to hook people, a face that's recognizable, that's loved or known is enough for a hook, right? Yeah. So you've got that every single week. And actually, what could you be doing?
Sounds crazy. Like, I think we've got complacent, and complacency is the enemy. Like, honestly, this realization has all basically happened in the last 24 hours.
No, I love it. No, I think you're right, because it's like, actually,
we've done the same thing.
You've got your bread and butter, you've got it fine, and obviously, yes, success, growth almost disguises the fact that no, now you need to jump up a level. How do you do that? You get even deeper into a social strategy that's more bespoke, because you're right, actually, so much of social, and this is a good lesson for anyone, don't just rely on cut downs, don't just rely on repurposing. If you really want to take things another level, you have to get stuck in on the day. We find that with Sidemen stuff now. Like, we've started getting a lot more into the Sidecast and the Side Plus filming days, and our social team are right in there, new ideas all the time, consistently with the guys. They are the hook, right? But there's so many things now, so many viral moments that are now flooding TikTok all the time, because there's just a deeper focus, and that's been a level up over the last 6 months, really. So similar sort of thing to you.
My favourite things are when you see, I can't remember which brand did this, but they posted the polished, finished advert. Oh, it's going to come to me after we finish filming, which is so annoying. They did it with Train Girl, when I also can't remember. And it was a brand and it wasn't MAC, it was another brand.
No, was it a cosmetics brand?
No, it was a car brand. I want to say it was like
Renault? I don't know. Let's call it Renault.
Okay, Renault. And they posted the final polish with their, like, I don't know, setup, like 100k camera setup to TikTok. And then they posted the social media manager who got the behind the scenes of the air of the people blow drying her hair to make it like go backwards. That got like billions of like millions and millions and millions of views, because it's the stuff no one sees, and that's what they want to be brought in on. And if you get people in there, that's your community. Do you know what I mean? If you get them in, like, to see behind the scenes, like, we know the people who watch the vlog, there are, like, die-hard community. Like, they're there, they want to see it all. They want, like, the behind the scenes, the gossip, the entertainment, the real raw stuff, because that's where the connection comes from. And then they're in.
It's your point on value before as well, right? People value the insight that they don't normally see, and it's just giving a little bit of something that people know is personal or slightly more hidden.
Yeah.
You know, people get used to what they see, great, but it's like, let's go a little bit deeper. And the minute you go a little bit deeper or open another door, actually, you're right, the reaction on social is often 10 times better because, like, I've never seen this before. How interesting, how exciting. It's a really good point. Let's play a game. Can you please pick a card and read it and tell me the first thing that comes to mind, please?
What percentage of guests cry on the Diary of a CEO podcast? 50%?
Why? Because there's a real magic to vulnerability that you guys have created. Why and how?
There's so much to it. From the research our team do before with their team or them, they'll do like a research call in the same way you would if you were going on and doing a long form interview on TV. So the team will do a research call. They will
With the guest?
With whoever's
Or the
available.
team, yeah.
Sometimes, depending on the conversation that's being had, sometimes it's going to be with family members. Maybe they need to get another angle that they're going to bring up. And that's often where we see the tears, is when Steve brings up something they didn't know was going to come up. And it's like a shock factor, or it goes way deeper than they thought. And I think the reason people get so comfortable and feel safe enough to cry, or that they can't control their emotions, is because the room itself feels like it's you and Steve. You can't see the cameras, so it feels very intense.
You can't. Interesting.
You can't see the cameras when the lights go down. Obviously, when the studio is set up, there's loads of people there. Like, our producer wears all black, and we'll walk around, and Steve even made him wear black socks because he was wearing white socks. He was like, I could see your feet moving, because it's like little details like that, so that they feel like they're genuinely like a therapy session. Like, we don't want to make it into that, but so many guests,
it's comfortable enough that
they
people
just
can
feel
really,
relaxed and feel like no one's watching, and they forget that they're being recorded, which very rarely happens. Like, like, if you've got cameras, you know that, like, part of me is always thinking like, oh, like, did I say that okay?
You feel like you're being watched naturally because
Exactly.
there are cameras watching you. But in that set, that's really interesting that you kind of
can't
hide
see.
that. And also, I remember reading or seeing or noticing, I can't remember where, the no sock, the no shoes, little details like that, right? That
And
actually people just feel comfortable.
The music from when they come in, we've researched what music they relax to, and we're playing that playlist. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all these things I can't even tell you, but it's
just deep.
It's deep, and it's intimate. Like, that room, we call it the room where it happens. Maybe stolen from Hamilton, but we call it that because it's so intense.
And was that all engineered in the design of the room and the design of or was it because, you know, like, how did you even craft that space to make it so warm?
It evolved. It used to literally be filmed originally it was filmed in Steve's bedroom. Then we moved it to his kitchen, and then we created this set. And there are things like the distance between the chairs is like researched to be a distance that makes you feel like you're connected and involved, and not too far, so that you can kind of keep your guard up. It's like all little things. The round table, like there's Steve's obsessed with like behavioral psychology and all of that side of things, and there's so much in there that if you're a behavioral psychologist, you'd point to and be like, yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense.
Tick, 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 tick.
But it's evolved. Like the music, the research calls, like that's all evolved as we've grown and been able to resource that.
Amazing. Right, next one, please.
Well, this is just me. Oh, the
How
question.
to choose? Yeah.
How to choose the right marketing channels for your business. Well, I just posted this recently, so I think I can remember. But how to choose the right marketing channels for your business is all about kind of what we touched on earlier. You need to go where your audience are, not where you think they are. Like, research where they actually are. So if you love being on TikTok and you're posting your content to TikTok, but really 90% of your audience are day in, day out spending their life on LinkedIn, you need to go over to LinkedIn. And I caveat that by saying, like, if you need to also go where you're comfortable and interested and want to make content, but you have to compromise. Like, if they already on LinkedIn and you don't like it, like, you need to go there, or you need to think of another business idea. But the thing that people get wrong early days with marketing channel mix is spreading themselves too thin, and they end up not speaking to anyone. And then they come being like, I've done all of these things. Like, why am I not getting any conversion? Why is no one following? And it's because they don't feel like they're being spoken to directly. And there's a real need and trend of 2023, I guess, of personalization. And personalization is where people feel like the content is being made for them. So it's really important that I think you nail your one or two platforms in your marketing mix. And that's in like your wider marketing mix, whether that's your influencer strat or your PR or your newsletter or your CRM, like whatever it is. Just don't try and do it all at once. Like, figure out one or two, like really get good at it, get consistent and get a cadence that works for you. And then you can think about expanding. But don't do it all at once, please.
Yeah, please don't do it.
Last year, the Diary of a CEO, this is a LinkedIn post screenshot. It says, last year, the Diary of a CEO became the first video podcast in the world to stream on an airline. It's now scheduled to stream on 9 major airlines globally. The show was first podcast to stream inside prison cells across the UK. It's the first independent podcast to stream on BBC iPlayer.
It's huge. Like, that's such a... Again, to your point on doing trailers. Podcast on an airline. But again, it's not a podcast. And that's the point.
It's not, but if anywhere you can watch and seek entertainment or learning, we want to be. I mean, I wouldn't be... There aren't plans at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up on Netflix. Do you know what I mean? That's the direction it's going in. We're kind of replacing that sort of... what was Piers Morgan's show? Life Stories.
Yeah.
It kind of... It fills that sort of gap, so it could live on like mainstream TV, but really that doesn't fit with our like the direction we want to go in.
Yeah.
We want creative control, and that doesn't really allow it. So it's like, again, with our mission is like, how can we reach as many people as possible? That includes people. I think as of this week, we've just had a call with what do you call it, like the army and the RAF and all of that stuff to go on to their screens and be part of their training and their lessons as well, because we have this like breadth of content that covers so many different topics,
also with such depth as well, right?
Depth, like it can replace so much. I would love to see it in mainstream education. Like that's that
Diary of a CEO University would also be really cool. I'm sure it's on the list. Come
we're a bit busy at the moment,
but one day
there's a few things happening at the moment that will come about next year that really are going to take it to the next level, which I'm very excited about.
Great. One for after the show. Next.
Oh, it's just Ant.
Bless him.
He's our video trailer editor, our head of trailers, and he is the most magnificent storyteller I've ever met in my life. And his attention to detail and care. Like, I don't know where we find these people who just care so much, even though they haven't been put there from the start, which I think is really interesting. I mean, we have a very deeply ingrained culture, and we hire based on, you know, our values. So it all lends itself to that. But he's an incredible talent, and he's the one who, you know, we had these trailers that we were figuring out and just trying to put out each week, and he turned them into this art form, and he's like widely recognized now as kind of leading in this industry. And people were like, how do we find one of him? He was a film trailer editor. So that it all goes back to this thing, like, we never saw it as a podcast. We didn't want a social media editor. We wanted someone who could craft stories and make you itching to watch. And, you know, I will often, there might be an episode where I haven't been in and I haven't watched it, and I'm like, this guest really isn't like who I'd usually click on. I'll watch the trailer and I'm like, I need to go watch now.
Yeah.
It's an art form. Like, it's incredible. And you don't notice, but no one can notice unless you're behind the scenes, like the level of detail and experiments that are happening in every single trailer is wild.
I think you see he's been great at posting on LinkedIn and sharing his timelines, and even just, I look at them. I saw one for the episode that's coming out this week. I was just like, what? Like, it's this deep and this like for a trailer, and you go, right, okay, that's why it's the biggest podcast.
Yeah.
That level of detail and that commitment to, because a lot of editors, even if they are like well paid, whatever, they might not give it that level of depth. Like you can tell he really cares. That sort of timeline I saw was like, you love what you do and you care so deeply that you are going to you're going to such detailed lengths to make this amazing.
He'll listen to that trailer at every level. So he'll listen to just the music and see how it makes him feel. Then he'll listen with the audio on top and see how it makes him feel before he's even watching it. It's that deep. And he, honestly, I think this about him. I think this about all my team I get to work with. Like, it's just the biggest honor. Like, to be around such creative minds is so cool. This is me. On the Social Climber. So Social Climber originally I was a freelancer before I came to the Diary of a CEO, and I used it as my public facing profile. So I believe quite heavily in social proofing yourself, more so than, I think it gets you a lot further than a CV. I see social proofing, I guess, as personal branding, which I hate the term, like it is what it is, but you online. It originally was my kind of forward-facing, public-facing portfolio that generated me leads and clients because they saw the value I was adding for free and wanted to get involved and pay for services. I came in full house.
Came full-time in-house.
I became full-time in-house. It's like, that doesn't make sense. And this became like a passion project. So really now I use it as, like, as I said, my messy playground. I get to try new things. I get to update a community because, as you probably can hear, like, I'm so obsessed with this. Like, I'm so obsessed with marketing and social media and trends and updates. And my team, most of my team is sick of hearing it all the time. So I get to share it with these people instead. They're not sick of it. They love it, but they don't, you know.
They won't tell you anyway.
They don't. Yeah, it is what it is.
But you provide value every day. And that's the thing I love about what you do and how you share everything is, to your point earlier, just provide value. Like, don't look to get from people. And I think now, obviously, you've got this incredible job and you're very passionate about it. It must be nice in a bit of a relief, because even though, yes, you'll get leads all the time, you can kind of, it's not your business anymore. Your business is to build this brand. So it must be nice just to be able to share without having that kind of financial or commercial drive where you're like, this is to build my kind of consultancy business, you know?
It's literally a passion project. Like, it's a hobby.
Yeah,
it's so
great.
much fun. Like, it's a toxic hobby because it means I'm always working.
But
I love it. And it just, like, really scratches that itch of wanting to just, like, I loved working with small local businesses. That's what I did, like, before pandemic, and help them develop their understanding. And these are people kind of, the people we were talking about earlier, who have no teams and don't have a clue where to start. And if I can just offer that all in one place, I know that, like, I'm also giving back and helping in that way, and that's really important to me. It's also served as a way to generate podcasts and conversations and allow me to become that, and, like, my LinkedIn, a thought leader in the space, which is what I want to use those platforms for as well. I think people are getting really lost and caught up in this whole personal branding world, and they don't really know why they're doing it or what they're doing. So I think it's really important to know, like, why you're doing it. Otherwise you end up just talking.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make much sense.
Don't need more voices. That's for sure. We don't need more voices.
We don't need more voices. And this is a Diary of a CEO book, so 33 Laws of Business and Life, which we brought out.
You smashed the rollout for that, by the way.
We brought out in August, and it's just done 9 weeks, or nine weeks last week, on the Sunday Times bestseller in top 10, which, when you compare to, I came in just before we launched Happy Sexy Millionaire, which was his first book. It did 1 week at number 2.
Wow.
And then dropped out because our audience was significantly smaller, and we were so pleased to even make it into that list, which really demonstrates kind of, I think, where we've come from and, like, where we're up to now. But yeah, it was so much fun. The coolest thing about my job is there are no limits. So Steve goes, get this book to number 1 on the Sunday Times bestseller, and I'm like,
cool.
Heard you loud and clear. You best believe we're going to do some crazy influencer rollout. We did.
I remember, like, I watched that unfold both behind the scenes and in front, and just seeing, like, the mechanics of that and knowing what goes into it. I'm like, wow, you didn't sleep.
I didn't sleep. I actually ended up being really sick after, like, 2 weeks after. It was when everyone's kind of getting fluey, but I was like, it's no surprise because my adrenaline's been up here.
Yeah.
Like, I love that feeling. Like, I crave it, but naturally your body at some point is going to be like, okay, stop.
Please. Get to bed.
But it was so much fun, and we were working on that for probably like 4 to 6 months. And we were like, how do you influencers get boxes every single day? Like, PR boxes are just, like, piled up in their offices. How do you get them to post? Well, they can't see the inside of it until they post. So we had a 80% post rate from our boxes, which is just every influencer agency would dream of. And it's just about thinking from, like, a social first perspective or a first principles. Like, if you want people to post, make them post. Don't like cross your fingers and hope for the best, or think you've given them enough that they must post. They get everything for free. Like, these people get everything for free. So yeah, we worked out, I can't remember what the figure is, it's in the vlog, that we got, like, kind of millions of pounds worth of marketing, and we spent I think under 50k. So it was definitely worth the investment. Like we saw a really good ROI from that, which was
Great.
fantastic. And then just so many other things. Like that book was, we got to do like a CGI creation for the first time, which we decided 2 weeks before. We did this like sound timer that smashed in London, and that generated loads of noise as well. And also it was just something we've never tried before. And also no one's ever done to launch a book. This is the thing, like the book industry and publishing industry, like we're working with Penguin, like best publishing house in the world, but it's very traditional, like in how they do things. So everything about this was disruptive for them. But we approached it as we would with any other project, and we did it ourselves. And we brought that mindset of, if we're going to launch a product, like we're going to launch a product and we're going to make some noise. And it's just doing crazy numbers. Books are really interesting because we work in social media and it's very instant and things disappear. Like you have a 24-hour story, or the lifespan of a TikTok is like a few days or whatever. But books like live on forever. Whether it's a pro or a con, they're there, and people share and post it every single day, and we're like, wow, this is really cool. So more of that to come.
Amazing. One last question for you. Social media manager who goes full-time with Steve 3 years ago, 10,000 subscribers. What would be your one piece of advice to her looking back right now?
Try and take more of it in. I think all of it, but the first 6 months went so quickly. I didn't even have a chance to breathe, like come up for air. I wish I'd done something. I wish someone had told me to like journal every day, or like write it down, or film at the end of each week like what you've done and how you're feeling, because I can't remember a lot of it. It's all like a blur, and I don't think I've taken the time to really process myself. And also I think when people ask for advice and they're starting their journey, I like really struggle to remember how I was feeling and those thoughts. And I think it would have been so much more helpful if I'd just taken a breath. But you don't at the start because it's so exciting, and you're busy. You're not sleeping. You're all together all day, every day. We'd be in Steve's house till 10 p.m. every night. We loved it. We would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. It was real startup culture to start with. We still hold on to a lot of that. Like we're still really messy behind the scenes, but we have an office now where, we have screens and desks and all of this stuff, which we didn't have. We were like on the sofas, and I love it. And I wouldn't change anything that happened, but I wish someone had said kind of just take a breath and just take it in and process what's going on and like allow yourself that time, because it was a whirlwind and I wish I could remember more of it.
Amazing. I think that's a good place to end. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Well, okay, I hope you can be a marketing director yourself after that. There were so many gems from Grace. Just want to say thank you so much to her, obviously, for coming on this episode, and I hope you got a lot from it yourself. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this with somebody who needs to skill up in marketing, and we'll see you again for another episode of Unboxed next week.